In 2019, a video leaked from Chinese military social media. It showed candidates from the Falcon Unit, China's main counter-terror outfit, under the People's Armed Police, going through a week of training their instructors officially called Devil's Week. The Devil's Week, 5.5 days of non-stop ops, sleep deprivation, exposure to extreme temperatures, ramping physical loads, and simulated combat scenarios that looped with no recovery gap. Any instructor from Naval Base Coronado in California who watched that footage would have recognized the structure right away. They weren't watching some homegrown Chinese drill. They were watching a take on Hell Week, the roughest week in the American Navy SEAL selection pipeline, the gauntlet that washes out more than 70% of candidates who make it to the basic underwater demolition SEAL course, BUD-S, and that for decades was seen as the most extreme psychological screen in any Western military. China had copied the idea, and the question Pentagon and SOFREP analysts started asking out loud wasn't whether China was copying, it was why, and whether the copy would work. To answer that, you've got to get what Hell Week actually is, not the version in documentaries and action flicks with muscle-bound recruits sprinting on the sand while instructors scream. The real one, documented by operators who lived through it and who describe what happens after the human body blows past limits most people never come close to testing. BUD-S kicks off in Coronado, Virginia Beach, at one of the world's largest special operations training compounds. Phase 1 runs 8 weeks. Hell Week lands in week 3, deliberately early, before the US government sinks months and millions into each candidate's specialized training. The logic's blunt and brutal. Find out who won't make it before it's too expensive to find out. The numbers are out in the open on the official Navy SEALs site. 5.5 days of continuous operations. Under 4 hours of sleep for the whole week. Pacific water temps off Coronado in winter around 60 degrees Celsius. Cold enough to push anyone toward progressive hypothermia if they're in it long enough. Non-stop physical work, beach runs, open ocean swims, paddling rubber boats in 10-foot surf, team carrying logs for hours on end, stress positions the human body wasn't built to hold. What kills more candidates during Hell Week isn't the physical pain. It's what instructors call the moment of decision, the specific point, different for every candidate. When the brain registers that the suffering isn't stopping and the only quick off-ramp is to walk to the bronze bell hanging in the middle of the training field and ring it 3 times. Ringing the bell means you're done. No yelling, no argument. You ring, hand in your ID helmet, and get led to a warm room with hot coffee and a bed. The bell is each candidate's worst enemy. Not the instructors, not the cold, not sleep deprivation. The bell is the exit your own brain will keep offering you, on repeat, with every rational argument it's got, in the dead of night. Brandon Webb, a SEAL Team 3 operator who later taught BUD-S and wrote extensively on selection, described what he saw as an instructor in a way that lights up what China's trying to copy. It isn't the physically strongest candidates who finish Hell Week. It's the ones who can put functional distance between physical suffering and the choice to keep going, who can watch their own body coming apart like it's something separate from who they are and still keep moving their feet. That ability, what US military psychologists call functional dissociation under extreme stress, is what Hell Week is really testing, and it's what China flagged as the critical gap in its own special operations forces. Because here's the bind Chinese military planners ran into when they started stacking their elite units against America's in the 2000s. The People's Liberation Army has north of 2 million active troops. It's got modern kit, sophisticated weapon systems, and military infrastructure expanding at a clip. What it doesn't have, and what's infinitely harder to build than any weapons system, is a special operations culture that turns out operators who can work on their own, make independent calls under crushing pressure, and push missions forward when every support system's gone dark. That shortfall isn't a secret. SOFREP, which publishes analysis from US SOF veterans on global military capability, has documented what PLA watchers keep saying. The cultural architecture of the Chinese military, heavy on rigid hierarchy, Communist Party loyalty vetted at multiple levels, and centralized decision-making, produces soldiers who excel at executing orders but are deeply boxed in on operational autonomy. A US NCO at sergeant level often has field decision authority a Chinese counterpart doesn't, because the American system was built to push decisions down and the Chinese system was built to pull them up. Marine Corps University Press put out an analysis in 2025 tracing reforms China's rolled out since 2017, specifically to close that gap. The PLA adopted the 12-man team structure that's the basic building block of US special operations. It stood up a new professional selection track that, for the first time, lets university students from any military academy in the country try out for SOF. A radical shift in a system that used to recruit almost entirely from units already on active duty. And it launched a program Chinese official docs describe as aimed at psychological testing, not just physical. The Snow Leopard unit, the People's Armed Police's elite counter-terror outfit, a different animal from Falcon but in the same prestige bracket, published selection requirements that include multi-phase psychological screening before intake, something you didn't see in earlier generations of Chinese SOF. Washout rates in initial training, per the only sources we've got, Western reads of Chinese military documentation, sit between 50% and 90%, numbers Chinese planners have clearly tuned to echo American program attrition. But here's where the copy runs into a problem no Devil's Week can fix. SOFREP has laid out what US military analysts describe as the toughest cultural wall in modernizing Chinese SOF: the relationship between the individual operator and institutional authority. Navy SEALs are trained explicitly to push back on orders they see as tactically wrong, to pitch alternate plans in briefings, to exercise independent judgment in the field when the chain of command's out of reach. That autonomy isn't grudgingly allowed alongside military discipline. It's core to what makes a SEAL effective in the real world. The PLA's political architecture adds a wrinkle training can't sweat out. Every Chinese military unit has a political commissar parallel to the military commander, with authority to review and challenge operational decisions on behalf of the Communist Party. For a special operator whose edge is decision speed, discretion, and autonomous authority in the field, that dual command setup is a ceiling no pile of devil weeks can punch through. Brandon Webb put it bluntly when he weighed in on Chinese SOF expansion. You can copy the physical selection program. You can't copy the culture the physical program is for. Hell Week exists to find men who can think on their own under extreme pressure. If the system you're selecting into doesn't use that autonomy, if the operator you're building will spend a career waiting on a political commissar's sign-off before making a call in the field, then you're running the wrong filter for the wrong job. That doesn't mean Chinese SOF can't get it done. On domestic counter-terror, on high-profile security gigs like the 2008 Olympics, and in scenarios where the chain of command is there and working, Falcon and Snow Leopard have shown real capability. What US analysts question is how those units hold up in the kinds of missions SEALs and Delta run day in, day out. Foreign soil, no comms with higher patchy intel, and a clock that won't stop. Because that's the gap Hell Week is meant to close. Not just the ability to take cold and sleep loss, though that matters. The ability to keep making the right calls when every outside support vanishes, and the only thing standing between mission failure and mission success is what's inside you. You can build that with one brutal week of training, But you can't build it without first building a culture that values and uses the autonomy that training surfaces. China got the tool. It's still building the culture the tool assumes, and that's a difference no copy can erase, at least not in the next few years. If you want to see what happens when troops raised in the opposite culture, where rigid hierarchies are virtue, not a handicap, run into American operators trained to think completely on their own. That video's on screen now. Subscribe if you want to stay inside the analyses Pentagon briefs chew over and press conferences dodge.